What's up, guys? I'm Jeff.
I'm Alyssa.
And welcome back to the Real Life Podcast, where we talk about faith, culture, and answer your questions. How you guys doing today? It's a great day. It's actually nighttime here, so you guys are all probably asleep in the intercontinental 48 contiguous United States because it's like, 7 or 8 p.m. here, which means it's like 11 in the West Coast, and then it's like 2 a.m. in like New York right now.
Okay, guys. Jeff, we have been sick for a week and a half. Jeff today is finally feeling better. He shaved his head. He shaved his beard. He's like a new person. So he's a little excited to be here. I'm back in the game.
I'm just a lion ready to be released from my cage.
But sorry, I'm still like a little sick. So sorry for my voice.
Okay, we don't like wasting time on this podcast, so let's just chat about the topic. The topic today is... The topic today is how we behave and talk online, because most of us seem to suck at it based on the comments I read. Right?
I mean, I don't feel like our people...
No, that's actually my point. Okay, here's the thing, guys.
Who are the people?
Exactly my question. Exactly my question. Okay, here's a conversation we want to have today. How do you behave and talk online? Like I don't feel like this should even be a podcast, but I almost feel like a parent in this one.
Like we need to though.
Yeah, here's what and guys, I'm coming at this from a little bit more objective standpoint, in the sense of like, it doesn't bother me at all like when people are just super vitriolic or give us like, I think there's something wrong with me emotionally.
Well, no,
I need to go get it checked out.
You're an 8, so you don't care what people think.
Yeah, so I'm just like, I just laugh. But part of me does start to kind of, but because I think of, we have a few more followers than some people, we then get a kind of a more wider spectrum and picture. Like it just happens more, So then because of that, you just read these messages from people and you're just like, what? Like on the daily. And I'm just like, and I was like, who are these? My first question that absolutely, or my first emotion is I'm befuddled. I am absolutely befuddled. And here's why. Because I want to meet these humans in real life. Like I've never just come across someone at a coffee shop that just like, if they overhear your conversation about X, just jump in and say, oh yeah, that's what, sarcastic, mean, flippant, rude, demeaning. Like you're like, what? That doesn't. So I just where are Jeff, these people are all invisible. They're all hiding and I want to like, I guess here's my main emotion I feel is like, now when I walk down the street, I kind of like always look at people and I go, oh, is that one of those people that is online? Is that one of those people that's like really like doesn't know how to behave and doesn't know how to communicate?
Okay. We're just joking here, but I mean, making light of it, but it is for real. I have had moments like that where people have said things or we've been in heated discussions with other people. But I think it's so different when you're in person, because online you don't get any of the, what's it called? Body cues. Body language. And so I think it can come across way worse online than in person, although in person it can come across bad too. But in person too, it's like you're with a person and there's like flesh in front of you. And so you're, even if it's heated, I feel like there's still this, for the majority, at least the people that are responding online that we know, I feel like if they were in person, it would be a lot different. And even if it is really heated and you really disagree and you're putting out these flippant answers, I feel like the end of it, like if it's family members or something, you still love each other, or there's still like I don't know. And online, there's no closure. It's just like, and I feel like because nobody sees you and you don't have, you're not in person with them, sometimes people feel like they can just say whatever they think, and like it can just be mean, or it can be unneeded, or maybe they are really passionate about something that we totally disagree with, but it's like there's no place to have a conversation or to have the body language or to have closure. It's just like you just say something. And I think sometimes we online, it's like, what do you call it? There's just not that, you don't realize you're talking to another human. And so a lot of times people can be really rude and hurtful. Yeah. And I think it needs to be talked about, because even last night, one of my really good friends was storying and was just like, I don't know what people were saying, but people were just being really mean, and she couldn't story anymore. And it just broke my heart. I'm like, why? I don't even understand it. Like, what are people even saying? She wasn't controversial in anything. Like it just didn't make sense to me. And so I think it does need to be a conversation, because I think in our era, people feel the right to say whatever they think online, not realizing like hey, how is this going to affect the other person? Is this bringing life? Is it kind? Is it caring? Are you taking out your bitterness on somebody or being really harsh in a way that you don't need to be? Like, let's have conversations about things, but how do you go about it?
Yeah, totally. And I just think it's a funny, like, part of me is like, it's funny, but it's also really serious in the sense of like, it is at a crisis moment because we're so zombie like with how bad we do it, meaning like we're not awake to how ridiculous we actually look with how we type and how we like talk on the internet, right? That like how like it's very weird. Like there's so many people that's their daily life, right? Take an easy example would be like politics, right? Take someone like, you know, I would say the people that get hit the most from the right would probably be, you know, AOC and Hillary Clinton, and then from the left, you know, probably you know, Trump, obviously, some other people, but like there's obviously so like take Hillary, like I feel like specifically, and here's the thing that really frustrates me is like if you are a follower of Jesus, you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. You should only speak one very particular way on the internet ever. Yeah. And that is gentleness, kindness, you know, self-control, building up. And I'm not saying this has nothing to do with like, this is actually a totally separate issue, by the way, than having a strong opinion. And this is a totally separate issue than like telling the truth. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just like don't be an ASS with how you actually talk on the internet.
It goes against everything the Lord Jesus talks about. Love your neighbor as yourself. And there's that verse, I think in 1 Peter about like, don't complain about anything so that you can shine your light to the world. But if we're complaining, if we're being harsh, and then there's that whole thing like they will know us by the love for each other. And if you're not loving them, they're not going to know that Jesus is in you.
I just don't.
You're going to put a really bad taste in their mouth.
I just don't get how other people don't get it, or how they don't see that they're just looking ridiculous and they are sinning with how they're communicating on the internet. I don't get how people don't understand that or see that.
Do you think
like it's that serious?
Like people just aren't socially aware?
Maybe.
Or do you think they are fully aware? They just don't care?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, so take like Hillary Clinton example, for example. That's an easy kind of like, we have data there, 2016 with the election, how vitriolic it was towards her, right? Now, just to put my cards on the table, I significantly have some reservations and disagreements with a lot of her policies, right? And I would say probably some of you listening do and some of you listening don't. There's a couple things I enjoyed about her, a couple things I thought were particularly interesting about her, and a lot that I really struggled with, not only background-wise, but policy. Okay, so that's right. So when there's like this is how it normally happens on the internet. Like an article or something comes out that's just like, you know, New York Times or something just on the news feed pops up, and, you know, and it's like, you know, just something about some news headline from Hillary Clinton about what policy she said or what she believed, right, a couple of years ago. And then you go to the first couple of comments, and all the comments are just like, you know, she's ridiculous, she belongs in jail, she is corrupt, she's terrible, like and then people even obviously get worse than that with stuff that I can't even say, like that I don't even want to repeat, right? And like, okay, that, like if you're a follower of Jesus, even like flippant, being even flippant, I think is sinful. If you're a follower of Jesus, that needs to never come out of your mouth. What you should say is, what we should be people of charity, people of humility, people of a particular posture, because that is the way of Jesus. So when you're speaking on the internet and there's something like that, and you want to use it for what is actually really good, in my opinion, which is fun to, like, the internet actually can be great. There is pockets that are amazing discussion, viewpoints that I've never thought of. And it happened today, and I'll even elaborate that in a second. What you should say, instead of being like, oh, like we're just flippant, we just absolutely react, and we say, oh, she belongs in jail, X, Y, Z, and this is just a case study or an example. Rather than saying you could whatever the news headline is, you could actually read the entire article first, because most people don't do that. Yeah. Most people that comment don't read the whole article. Like that's actually been shown, by the way. And like we're just like I just have I have no tolerance for anyone who like isn't actually engaging when I'm posting. Like I'll take anything you want to say to me, but if you're not actually like reading what I said, then I'm just like, yeah, next. So what you should say is like, read it, then you should be thoughtful, and then you should say something like, oh, I really struggle and disagree with her policies, and here's why. That's a great comment. Why can't you just write that? Yeah. Right? Like I don't, it's really,
I don't feel like people think.
Yeah, it's really weird.
They don't think before they speak, but they also aren't thinking like, like logically like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
I
don't know.
Our emotions can take over.
And I can't, but I don't know why. Like, why? Do you think
it's a trained thing? Like people aren't being trained to do that?
Partly, but I also think we're training ourselves to do it. I think it gets worse and worse. Meaning like it's self-fulfilled. Like it's, the more you go into an echo chamber and the more you allow, like we're kind of radicalizing ourselves in soft ways towards ideologies. And that just is not helpful as a follower of Jesus, because we're above all ideologies and we believe in the king and his kingdom ideology, for lack of a better term. And so we don't submit or toe a party line whatsoever. That's not how we're prophetic and above any earthly kingdom, even though we might align more with one or the other. So yeah, I just think it's an interesting conversation of like, what I just don't understand. I want to think about it more, because I just don't get it. I'm just like, who? Because then I see these comments, I'm like, who are these people? Because when you go out in the normal world with actually flesh and bone and like coffee shops and grocery stores, not your phone, like this does not happen. Like people don't speak like this. I don't understand it. Like so first of all, I do want to challenge you. Like if you're a follower of Jesus, you really need to check yourself with how you speak about politics, how you speak about gun laws, with how you speak about police and Black Lives Matter, with how you speak about certain theological issues. And notice, by the way, I didn't even say what my opinion is on any of those things I just said. I just said you need to check yourself with how you talk about them. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Because I'm just so over like people that say they like love Jesus and like can't actually just be like an adult on the internet. Yeah. You know? Mm-hmm. So sorry, I got a little riled up. Any thoughts?
No, keep talking. This is really good.
Well, like for example,
because I thought of it on a different level.
Yeah.
So this is good.
I want to hear more of that then. But one more thing I'll say is this, and when it goes well, it goes really well then. And I'd be interested to like psychoanalyze it and be like, is it people that are usually putting some form of their identity in these ideas rather than the Lord, so that then they feel like when you're attacking their idea, like when you feel like if someone's disagreeing with your idea and you're putting your identity in that idea, not the Lord, then it feels like you're being attacked. And that's when you turn a little bit more animalistic, right? Sure. That's kind of the metaphor of an animal, right? Like when you poke a bear or something like that, or when you poke like a cat that's kind of like crawled, in a corner, it'll probably claw you.
Well, even, on a very different level, even in marriage, I feel like when you get in fights, it's usually not even what you're fighting about. It's the things going on within your heart, your identity things that are insecurities that are getting prodded. Yeah. And that's what makes it so make the fight so intense.
And I think that's what
hurtful. Yeah. Like, wow, that really, really hurt me. Why would that have hurt you? Like that was, I know I was wrong, but that was kind of minimal. Oh, because that went deep in this area. So I think that's kind of the same.
Totally. But I don't, it's hard to explain though, because I feel like on the internet, it tends to happen with stuff that like, there actually isn't even any personal investment. It's like literally just ideas. It's like political ideas. It's news articles. It's like theological articles. And then they jump in, like they have no stock in that. Like their life is not, they're not being attacked, right? It's
right, just but I feel like they are free to say anything and they're not held to any accountability. Yeah. They don't see the reaction. And sometimes I feel like people say things because they don't realize that somebody actually reads it. And so they don't see the person's hurt. They don't see the pain in their eyes. They don't see like, ooh, that really struck a point. Like you're speaking about somebody that God created. Totally. An image bearer. So why, even if you disagree with them, you still need to treat them with kindness.
Totally. Yeah. I just feel like I'm getting a little tired of like, I don't feel like the internet people need to, it makes you a little bit more depressed towards human hearts of like, there's a lot of people that I just feel like, and it's in us too. So we're not just wholly coming from this. Like I get upset sometimes and I disagree with people sometimes and I can say stuff that I've deleted for sure. So I need to totally be vulnerable and honest there. But I feel like in general, there's just these people where it is like the default every time they get into like, that's just how they react and how they talk. And you're just like, oh, that's just like a bummer. Like you didn't actually care to try to understand the point. You didn't actually, and by the way, because it doesn't help anyone when you do that, by the way. Like it doesn't actually take us farther as a society. It doesn't actually like make any of us smarter. None of us actually grow. None of us actually get better. Here's the thing. If truth is the actual pursuit, which it actually is as a follower of Jesus, but with a capital T, Jesus is truth. He is the truth, the way, and the life. If like, don't be nervous to pursue truth because Jesus is at the end of that path, right? So you can have a freedom to kind of go down the path of truth and seeking it out and what's false and what's true, right? And where the lies are and where they aren't. And not have to worry about your identity being attacked or all these different things. And so, yeah, I just find it super interesting. Like, and where this is coming from is today I just posted an article, and if you follow me on Instagram, you guys probably saw this will come out next week. So then a couple days, basically when you're listening to this, probably like basically the week before last week, like I ask Alyssa, like I love reading about anything and I love talking about anything. So maybe I am like a weird outlier. Like last night we had a fun conversation about marijuana because she's just like, hey, what do you think? And I was like, I tell you. But I was like, I don't think it's like, I just think it's weird that people think it's crazy. Like people just freak out. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm not going to say what our opinion is there one way or the other. But I will just say, I think you need to be sober minded. But no, anyway.
And just have the conversation.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Be comfortable with having the conversation.
Lens and like have it in a difficult way through the lens of scripture. Like does this glorify Jesus? Is this honor him? Do the scriptures say anything about this? What should our humility be? What should our posture be? Like, yeah, basically like I just like having external conversations about like I don't feel like just like let's have the conversation. That's a fun topic. What's the Bible say? Right?
Yeah.
I feel like some people just get kind of weird about like conversations.
But I also feel like part of that's your personality, but I really feel like your mom instilled that in you. I feel like she's so good.
Yeah, she's awesome at
having
that,
those hard conversations
and it being like externally objective.
Yes, and disagreeing with the other person, but having it with a lot of grace where you want to enter into the conversation. It's really enjoyable. And as someone who hates conflict, and I hate it when people disagree and it feels heated in the room. When we sit down with your mom and talk about these things, or with you and we disagree, I feel like it feels enjoyable. Like I can freely talk about these things and not feel like that person is attacking me.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, I peace out of those conversations.
Yeah.
Like when people like start having that spirit, I'm like, I'm good. I'm gone.
I want to like throw up and run away.
Well, I don't do that from the sense of like, I want to like run away from like like how you feel it. I'm like, this is dumb. This is like for 5-year-olds. Like I'll move on.
But all that to say, I feel like that's a real gift your mom gave you.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And another thing, I think that's a learned thing. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us don't learn that. We don't learn to have those disagreements in a way that is safe. Mm. I don't know. Maybe that's a huge thing. Like, are we providing a safe environment for people to actually tell our thoughts and our doubts and our questions and, and I think in order to have safety, then like ask the questions, have the conversations, but do it with grace. Don't do it.
Yeah. I feel like it's
harshly.
I think there's a level there of the safe thing, but for me, I'm even talking about a little different side too of just like, why can everything not be on the table to talk about? And why can everyone not just be chill?
Don't you think though in the Christian culture, some things are taboo? Like, oh, we shouldn't talk about that.
Yeah, but I don't know why. Right now, here's the thing.
I don't know, because I feel those with some things. And that's why last night I was like, ooh, let's talk about this because I actually feel really uncomfortable with it. And I don't think about it, but I think I should know about it.
Yeah. And so then I said, well, what? And I went through a bunch of points and I like unpacked how I think, what I think the arguments are, what I think the opinions are, and how I can maybe see something here. I can see something there. Yeah. But I just feel like, I don't know how like I feel like that's how, but here's the funny thing. And I don't want people to think that like, oh, we do a great job at this. Why does everyone not do good at that? Just got good job at this. What I'm saying is like I feel like anyone we're friends with and in community with does this. So I'm just like, who are these people that are freaking out online? Like, it's not even us. It's just like all of our friends. Like we have all these discussions with our friends, and we have all this discussion with people older than us.
Awesome
and we have this discussion, like you said, with my mom and stuff like, it's like, I'm like, who, I literally want to like, I want to like go hunting for like these, like in the sense of like I want people to have to wear signs. I want people to have to wear signs of like saying that like, I am a terrible behaved person on the internet. I want them to wear that every single day. I don't know how to speak on the internet. I am mean. I am vitriolic. I demonize people on the other side and I act like a 5-year-old. You need to wear that sandwich board sign every time you go out because I want to know like, oh, is it them? Is it them?
Okay, so that's my question. Is it because they're socially unaware, or is it because those are the people that have a really hard heart and they feel like they can treat people however they want? Yeah. And it's really like a reflection on what's going on in their life.
I think that's a huge part of it. And that's what I kind of meant with the identity part. And then, I think you're right, is that
they're bitter, they're resentful, they have a hard life.
Yeah, most people that ever jump in that direction, right? Anyone that, and this actually is this is an encouragement I'll give to everyone listening, because I've seen this happen a couple times. People to me to people. It's gone both ways, because I think this is just how the Spirit works, where most people who are kind of vitriolic online, right? Or if they kind of spew a flippant comment, an angry comment, a mad comment, a rude comment, whatever, big or small, it tends to not be from a vacuum. It tends to be coming from somewhere.
Totally.
We are complex creatures that are interwoven and connected to our experiences, our emotions, how we're doing that day, how we're doing tomorrow, what happened 10 years ago to us, what happened to our parents, or what happened to what job we have. So how we read that quote versus someone who doesn't have that job. Like, we're very interconnected, complex creatures. So I get that, but I feel like, and a lot of times too, we have to give ourselves a lot of grace. Most of us are coming out of our experiences more than we think. Meaning, it's not for sure that a person in Iowa is going to have a certain view on guns that a person in Seattle is going to have, but I bet I could probably guess which one's which, right? Yeah. Why? Because we are a little bit more created by our environment and our location than we think. Yeah. I'm not the person who says that like you are just exactly a product of your environment. I think we're more complex than that too. We're like with viewpoints, but I think we also have to just give credence to that, right? And so, yeah, we're coming out of a place that informs us, but I do think when people are usually responding in vitriol or frustration or hate, it's usually coming from like something got touched.
Yep.
Something got touched. Either like, and it's usually fear. Almost always it's fear. Fear is like the overlying thing. Like, it's when people are angry, it's usually fear.
Really?
I think so. I think anger is the mask of fear. And I think that's even true of like with hate, right? So like, it's interesting that when you read 1 John, it says perfect love casts out fear. It doesn't say perfect love casts out hate. But if you were to quickly go on the street and just say real quickly, run up to people and say, what's the opposite of love? They would all say hate.
Yeah.
But it's like the scripture never really says anything about hate. Why? Because hate is just kind of the symptom of fear, right? Like Adolf Hitler is seen as one of the most hateful people in all of human history, probably, in my opinion, because he got there, in my opinion, because of a fear. He feared that a certain other race was going to threaten his power or control, right? So fear,
so good,
like fear creates hate. Fear is the center.
Sense.
Fear is the nucleus. Fear is the ground zero that pushes you towards hate. And so a lot of us don't like to go there, though. We don't like to go that deep in our own soul and be like, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? Because people who are very generous in spirit, people who are charitable in spirit, people who are willing to not really fight for what they believe in some sense, because of course you should fight for what you believe in one level, are people who are fearless. Isn't that interesting? Jesus himself, right? The guy literally, like, think about the demeanor of Jesus. He was the most fearless person ever. Why? Because he wasn't threatened by anyone. He didn't feel threatened by anyone else, and he actually let them put him on a cross. They killed him. Like that, like Jesus's life versus the religious leaders and versus the governing authorities and the Sanhedrin and all these different kind of pressure groups who all felt fearful and threatened by him, right? Jesus felt none of that because he was the purest spirit, full image bearer of God, as well as God felt no fear. So it's just an interesting, that's a perfect microcosm, I think, of the internet of like don't be like the religious leaders or the governing authorities who feel like their interests and their power is being threatened. And so then they grab, they claw, and then ultimately they kill, right? Be more like Jesus, who says like, I'm actually secure in myself. Go ahead and kill me. Right? Those are two very different lanes to track in. And I think those are like metaphors for how you should behave on the internet. Most people over here are behaving this way because they feel threatened, right? Something feels threatened. They feel like the country's going to be taken from them. They feel like their rights are going to be taken from them. They feel like there's a million different things, right?
That's really good.
And by the way, just to be crazy explicit, this is separate from just having a strong opinion, right? Like, I think I'm actually one of the strongest opinion people there is, right?
Yes. So
that's a different conversation. We're not saying have zero opinions, just be flimsy and weak. It's usually the opposite. I'm saying have super strong opinions, but be fearless and don't be threatened by anything. That's different.
Ooh.
Right? Any final thoughts? 5 more minutes.
Well, that just is convicting to my own heart.
Well, it really makes you have to, a lot of this stuff, I think, and I have to check my own heart. You got to go internal. You got to say, what am I afraid of? Why did I react like that? Because I didn't react like that in a vacuum. I reacted like that because that hurt me, that offended me. I feel like I don't want to believe that they had it was a little bit true, and I don't want to believe it. So I want to just like put my fingers in my ears and yell,
Yeah.
Like
It's really good.
yeah, I don't want to listen to other viewpoints. I don't want to be nuanced, complex, and there's a pure element to it. Just it takes more work, in my opinion. That's one thing is a lot of us are just kind of lazy. I know
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like
a
I'm
huge
lazy
part.
in my own spirit, in the sense of like it takes just more work to be generous and charitable in spirit.
Yeah.
Because then you kind of have to lean in. You have to really lean in. Like it's easier to read a headline than read a whole article.
Yeah.
It's easier to scan it looking for the one thing that's controversial versus having here's a really good question, by the way, that can almost save you from 99% of dumb internet controversies of what people say that then is the headline. It's this one question. What are they trying to say?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That question will save you. Most people just like, oh, they said this, let's just latch onto this, and it was terrible, let's post this on all the things if they said this. And like maybe they did mean that, so then it's obvious, and you'll know that if you read it. Like maybe they meant that, they need to get kind of there needs to be consequences for what they said, whatever. But there's sometimes I read something and I'm like, oh, I don't think that they just fumbled there, or like they weren't trying, like what's their heart?
Yeah.
And that's what it means to be generous and charitable in spirit, is you're trying to say, what do you really mean by that? I want to assume the best about what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Right? Or another way I've heard it that's really helpful, and when you're in more of like a kind of structured argument or a debate with someone, is you want to say their argument back to them so well that like they would actually say, yes, that's what I believe. We usually do the opposite. We usually say things back to other people of like what they believe, and they're like, I don't believe that's junk. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we don't represent other people's arguments well. And so you should represent it so well that they would say, yes, that's what I believe. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, I'm gonna
Now take
I'm gonna
it
touch
home.
it. I'm gonna touch it on. Well, I'm gonna open up a new can.
Oh,
Are you ready for this? Which I haven't seen this happen in a little bit, but this really bothered me. It happened a lot, like a couple years ago. I get really upset when I see people like blog posts, comments on Facebook, comments on whatever, of like tearing down other leaders in ministry. Like that just, can we just talk about it for a little bit? Because
can we just talk about it? Guys, can we talk about it?
And maybe this is an old thing. Maybe it's like, because I'm kind of clueless to stuff like this, but I haven't seen it, and I haven't been on Facebook in ages, but I don't know if it still happens a lot, but I just saw this thing a lot where it'd be like a Christian leader, like an author, a pastor, whatever, and some people will disagree with something they wrote in a book, or some, like, not the whole book, but like one sentence, or or something they say, and they'll just go on and write this whole blog post of why this person is a heretic and Satan, like a spawn of Satan, and you shouldn't follow them. And it's like, no, that's actually, we've met them, we've sat down and had a meal with them, they're a friend of ours, like they really genuinely love the Lord. You just, as Christians, let's just bring it down to Christians now, we have to be so careful with what we say, and like, you know what I mean? Can you jump in here?
It's good jump in here.
Okay, I just feel like that
I agree.
really hurts my heart, and I feel like it hurts the Lord's heart, because these are His children.
That's what I was just going to say.
And it's okay to disagree with somebody. Let's have the conversation. Let's like think for ourselves. I think there can be leaders or books that we like agree with some of it, and there's parts that we don't agree with. Like, you can still read the book, like read the book for yourself. Don't just go by what other
most people don't do the homework again. Like, you don't do the homework.
Right.
Most people don't read an entire book that maybe has a page of controversy in it and say, well, what you should say is, well, yeah, I really struggled with that one, part, and I think I actually disagree with it, and here's why. But, I read the whole thing, I leaned into it, and there was a couple things that were helpful. Most people don't do that. They just go, this is why.
Or they
we use it as an add-on. Yeah.
Or they read one blog post of this person that tore it apart, and they're like, oh, they're such a heretic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no.
We're lazy. We don't do our homework. We don't actually want to go read the full book.
Right. But I just think as believers, we really need to be careful, because
Totally.
that one verse, like I mentioned in the beginning about, like, the world will know us by the way that we love each other. And if we are tearing each other apart online, people are not going to want to hop in and be part of
this Jesus thing.
This Jesus thing. Like,
you preach.
Yeah. And so
guys,
I
Alyssa
think,
doesn't get this fiery that often.
And maybe you guys, you can let me know, because I'm obviously not culturally relevant. Maybe this isn't happening anymore. But I just think, even as like, just be kind and like
Mm-hmm.
think of them as if they were the pastor at your church or your leader or your mom or your sister. Like, and not that gives them worth. They're worth because they're Jesus's image bearer. But I just think we need to be so much kinder and more loving.
Okay, I have lots of thoughts now.
Okay.
That's good.
Do you want to go there?
Well, we're gonna end here in a minute. So I'm gonna try to rapid fire them and then we'll end because I think you're so right. First of all, guys, I love that Alyssa gets fiery.
I wanted you to hop in there because I felt like I was left out. And
no, here's what I'll say. First of all, I think you're totally right, and I'll never forget something one of my mentors said like almost a decade ago. Now we're talking about division in the church, and he just said like when you're a parent, this really comes home because he just said like the language that is used for Christians over and over and over again in the scriptures is that we are God's children. We have been adopted into the family of God, right? And so that's like the primary way he wants us to think about ourselves. One of the primary ways. And so he said, one of my mentors really encouraged me. He's like, there's nothing worse than when you almost like anger, like a frustrated anger in his heart. He's like, as a father, when I see my kids just like fight with each other.
Oh, it's so worse.
Because you're just like, there's a level at which you are like, you guys are being ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like you're being ridiculous. You guys are like family.
Yeah.
You're family. You need to love each other. You guys are for each other. You guys, this is one of the best things you can possibly have in your life is a sibling.
Yeah.
Right. And he's like, it breaks. So part of it's like frustration, part of it's sadness that like, man, why are they doing this to each other? And he's just like, that's literally probably God's heart to the church.
Yeah.
Right. Now that's not to say, so first of all, I think that has to be your posture with, if someone is a baptized Christian, if they have stood up and said, I believe that Jesus is Lord. And this goes, and I mean, this is like, that's a very broad swath because there's some people within that swath that I significantly disagree with on a lot of things. And I actually question like, oh man, are they really following the Lord? I don't know. But I think we have to lean into like, if they're a baptized believer and they have said they're a child of God, obviously with fruit and some of these other things, then we need to lean into having that posture about they're a child and that whole idea of division and fighting. It shouldn't be petty, shouldn't be ridiculous, and just don't be stupid, right? Like they're a family member. They're a family member. So there's that posture, but then, and I agree, like, and a lot of us, we just don't realize like real people, like the best word for like what that's really hurting our culture right now is we dehumanize. The internet dehumanizes. The phones dehumanize. The social media dehumanizes. And that's the opposite of the gospel. The gospel humanizes. Jesus leans in. Jesus kneels down to the woman. Jesus looks someone in the eyes. Jesus doesn't, feels the person touch him in the crowd, right? So instead of the crowd, it's the individual. Like he humanizes. He understands stories and people, and he feels the full weight and burden of a personness all at once. We do the opposite, right? We let the tools and the culture that we're in isolate and dehumanize, because when you dehumanize, then you're able to treat them differently. And that's true, by the way, historically, of some of the worst atrocities in all the world. It's not a coincidence, by the way, that Hitler with Jews, you go to Rwanda with the genocide, some of these places. It's not a coincidence that you can actually track the first thing they did before they got to the crazy violence was they dehumanized them and actually called them subhuman, or they had certain names for them that are really derogatory. Why? Because you have to dehumanize someone first before you can usually treat them badly. There's something about us in our hearts that's like inerrant that we know someone's an image bearer. So we have to almost claw that off of them first before we can attack them. And so we dehumanize, right? So we have to keep that in mind with like people we're speaking about, that everyone's a real human. Every avatar online is a real human. But then we also, like I will say, but then there is a flip side to that coin that I get frustrated with, where like I think sometimes in the church world, like, and one more thing I'll say about that too. I also think, do you need to have an opinion on everything? Right? Like if it's not
coming from the most opinionated person I know.
Or do you need to say it? That's a good way to put it. Because yes, I got opinions. Especially with like religious leaders and church leaders. Like if there's a mega church pastor that maybe does something, I might have an opinion and I might speak on it, but it's like, is that relevant to me? No, like that might be relevant to the people that live in Chicago. That might be relevant to the people that live in South Carolina, right? Because that's the context. Like we make every localized problem a globalized problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And like, why should I have an opinion on that? It doesn't affect, I'm not a sheep there. I'm not a person there.
Yeah.
I'm not in relationship with that person. I've never endorsed that person. I've never talked about that person. I've never engaged with that person. Now, the one context that might be fair there is if a friend says, hey, I'm reading this book or something like this by this person. What do you think? Then I would probably say, hey, let me tell you what I think. I'm just saying, like, if it doesn't have, like, do you see what I'm saying with the localized, globalized thing? I think it's kind of funny and weird that we just assume we should have an opinion about every single person and every single thing, when I think it should be a little bit more like, well, how does the actual people, like, what do the people there believe? It's it's kind of their problem. And I don't mean that in the sense of like putting blame on them. I mean, like they're the ones walking through this. They should, like, they have ownership over this problem. Why should I have an opinion about it? It's theirs. They own it. So that's an interesting thing. Then lastly, what I'll say is the flip side of the coin, which I struggle with, which is when something does happen. And I think the millennial version of this is actually sometimes the opposite, where anytime you generously and hopefully charitably say something you might disagree with on someone, and someone just pulls out the division card. Do you know what I mean? I think there's a flip side of this problem that really annoys me, where people don't want to have deep, hard discussions about.
You still disagree.
Yeah, like do you know what I'm saying? But that one actually is more prominent than we think. Like a lot of times, it's like anytime someone writes an article or something that says, oh man, I really might disagree with this book, and here's a couple things why, but it was really generous, it was really kind, it was really humble. And then you read the comments there, and it's like, can't we all just get along? We're all God's children, and we're all just like, why you're just tearing each other down. That's not helping anyone. It's kind of this whole like love is love thing. And it's like, no, that's no.
Yeah.
Like we need to, like, we actually are horrendous as a culture at just having critical, thoughtful, hard discussions.
Yeah.
Like it's not this side of the spectrum where you're just rude and idiotic and stupid and hateful and mean, and it's not this side of the spectrum where it's like, let's just not have hard discussions.
Right. But I think too, in the cases I'm talking about, it's like,
yeah, yours is different. I was just saying.
No, I think yours is so good, but on another level, it's like there'll be a leader, and maybe they say something that somebody disagrees with, and then they feel, and it's just like I don't know how to exactly say it. They feel like then they need to speak up and protect their flock from following that person because they're going to lead their flock astray. Sure, there's like something in the Bible about that, but I think they don't, do you know what I mean? They don't, there is truth to that, of course, but I think some people then take it in a way that's like, no, that person still loves Jesus.
Yeah.
Like maybe you disagree with them in this area, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily, do you know?
Totally.
Okay, I know I'm like stepping on some toes, but can you
I agree with that. And I think we need to be wise and we need to be shrewd. I think it's sad, but a lot of things we've talked about this episode expose our Christian culture's lack of scriptural literacy. Mm-hmm. We don't know our scriptures. We don't read our scriptures. We don't know our scriptures. We don't devote ourselves to the scriptures, right? We know verses, we memorize verses, we kind of know the talking points of the Christian faith, and we kind of repeat what our pastor says, but we don't know the full narrative, breadth, story of God. What do the scriptures say in their complexity and their tension? Because there almost always is a tension or a complexity on almost every issue in scripture, right? And so, yeah, I just feel like, man, we need to know our scriptures and we need to lean into the scriptures. And there's so much of what it says about how we speak, how we communicate to each other, how we love each other,
how we honor
each other. Well, on top of that, protecting, guarding, devoting ourselves to truth, understanding the scriptures so that we're not fleeced or blindsided by lies, by people who are leading people astray. And so, man, it's like, I just think we just need to take it seriously, though, because when you take it seriously, you don't get as flippant with what comes out of your mouth.
That's good.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, guys, we could go on and on and on.
There's so many nuances to this one.
This turned into an interesting episode. Hopefully it was a good start. This is definitely not an all-encompassing episode. We don't feel like we solved any world's problems here. We don't feel like we even give that much value, but I hope it was a good kind of grenade-like episode that just kind of started a little conversation. So I'm going to probably do an Instagram post on this one because I really want to have this conversation for those who listened. What did you think? What did it do for you? What points stood out? How was it helpful? Do you feel the same way? Are we alone in what we said and how we feel? And we'd love to hear how you've navigated this as well. So we'll see you guys next week.